everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learned over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And in today's video, I'm going to take you through everything you need to know to care for Syngonium Albo plants. I thought I would do this care video a little bit differently to how I usually do my care videos. Usually I will just sit with the plant and chat about it, but I've been wanting to do quite a lot of things to these plants for quite a while in terms of getting them on moss poles, propagating them, getting them looking a little bit fuller. So I thought I would do that at the same time. So yeah, I really hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it useful. Let's get into it. So as you can see, I've got quite a lot of Syngonium albos here, and this one here is actually the original mother plant. This is the one that I started with, and over the years I've chopped it back so many times and I've got so many babies from it. So all of the other plants that you can see and propagations all have come from this one plant. And this is the plant that I'm going to kind of be working with the most today. So as you can see at the moment, it's just on a bamboo cane, and although it's keeping it upright, it's not really doing the plant any favours apart from that. I want to get it on a really nice moss pole and get it climbing a little bit better. Also, putting it on a moss pole means that it can absorb lots of micronutrients and hopefully give me some really big, gorgeous, mature growth. So that's my plan for today. But what I want to do first, because it's looking a little bit leggy, as you can see, it's not as full and bushy as I'd like it to be. So I'm going to take some cuttings, I'm going to propagate them, and then at some point I'm going to pot them back into the same pot and hopefully get this plant looking lovely and healthy. So I'm just going to start off by taking it off the bamboo. Whoa! So yeah, as you can see, it's desperate to be climbing. If you look at all those aerial roots there, the bits sticking out, they're absolutely desperate to be gripping onto something. So giving it a moss pole will mean that they're able to kind of form their own little root system, and the plant's just going to be a lot happier. So I'm just taking the bamboo cane out, and I'm going to take some cuttings of this plant. So I think what I'm going to do, when you take cuttings, you want to make sure it's got a nodal point. So I'll take one and then I'll show you. Also, make sure your scissors are very clean, because otherwise cross-contamination can mean that your cuttings don't make it. So there we go. I've just taken that one there, and the little bump where the leaves meet the main stem, that's called the node, and that is what you need if you want to propagate this plant. Aerial roots help. It's not always going to have aerial roots, but they can just help your plants push out some lovely roots. So I'm just going to take a few cuttings like that. Again, you can see there, it's got a node, and again, it's got a nice aerial root. And this bit here that I've cut, as you can see, it doesn't actually have a leaf on it. That's what's known as a wet stick, and I can still propagate that bit. I've got a very good example of this here, because I had this propagation box that, to be honest, I completely forgot about. I have totally neglected this box for probably about 2 months, and I opened it up the other day. I stumbled across it again, opened it up, and I was like, oh, there's stuff going on in here. And at some point, I obviously threw some Syngonium Albo wet sticks into this propagation box. Wow, those roots are way bigger than I thought they would be. But as you can see, the wet stick has started to sprout, and it started to grow into its own new plant. So in fact, I might be able to pot this up with this one today and get it going as a new plant. So yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll put that wet stick into my propagation box and hope that soon I will have a lovely new plant. And with the other cuttings I've taken, I'm just going to pop them into water, making sure that the node is completely submerged in water. You can propagate them in other mediums if you like you can use sphagnum moss, you can use perlite, but to be honest, for this plant, I've always had a really high success rate just using water. So that is what I'm going to do, and hopefully within the next few months they'll start giving me some lovely roots, and I'll be able to pot them up and they will make a lovely new full plant. Just to show you as well, I've got a little propagation here that's been in water for I think about 3 weeks now, and as you can see, in fact I'll take it out and show you, as you can see, it started growing some lovely roots already. It's not quite ready to be potted up yet. I usually wait until they were at least kind of double that size before I went ahead and potted it up, but they're getting there. I would say in the next few weeks it's probably going to be ready, but for now I'm just gonna keep it in water. Right, so I'm going to start off by making a moss pole for this little section here. I'll pop the camera down so you can see what I'm doing. I have made a video literally the other day about how I make my moss poles, so if you want to see that, I will link it in the description box below. But as I say, moss poles are just so fantastic for this plant because they help them to absorb lots of micronutrients, and if you do want your plant to grow fairly quickly and also give you lots of lovely mature growth, then it is honestly the best possible thing you can do. So, getting into the care needs of the Syngonium Albo, Syngoniums are quite well known for being able to survive in lower lighting conditions and do really well. The only thing you do have to think about with this plant, because it's got the whitey bits on it, the variegation, and those bits basically, they can't absorb light in the same way as the green bits. They don't contain any chlorophyll at all. So if you were to keep this plant in quite a low lighting condition, then you're probably going to notice its growth slow right down. It's not going to be very happy at all. So I found that medium to bright indirect light is the best for these plants. If you do have a Syngonium Albo with a higher balance of green, like for example, the mother plant here, that seems to have a fairly good balance of green at the moment, then it's probably going to do better in lower light conditions, but I still wouldn't recommend low light. I'd say ideally bright indirect lights, like the room I'm in right now, no direct sunlight, but just kind of filtered or natural light all day round for as many hours as possible is going to be best for these plants. And in regards to the white variegation, although it looks so pretty, if you've watched my videos before, you'll know that I struggled for quite a long time with my plants only giving me white growth, and it looks absolutely stunning, but it's just not sustainable. Like, as I say, they can't absorb light from those bits, so a lot of the time that white growth will look beautiful for a month, a couple of months, and then it's just going to die back. And that's why this one is looking a little bit leggy, because like for example, the points here that don't have any leaves, they were white leaves that have now died back and I've had to chop off. So the best way to preserve a good balance of both green and white in your plants, which is what you want, it looks lovely, but it keeps the plant healthy, is by chopping and propagating your plant like I've just done. For example, if you look at this point here where the leaves are pretty much completely white, what I really need to do if I want to keep that bit going and keep it healthy is chop just below the white, just there, so that new growth can start to emerge and hopefully give me a higher balance of green. I know it's a shame to do because those leaves do look really pretty, and you can just leave them, like they'll look pretty for a little while and then they'll die back. But if you're looking to get a really good healthy plant going, then I would definitely recommend chopping and propagating in order to preserve some of that green. The other really important thing with these plants, I mean all house plants to be honest, but especially plants that have a high balance of variegation and maybe can't absorb light in the same way as the completely green ones, is to make sure that you're keeping their leaves clean, because a build-up of dust or dirt, which just happens naturally over time to be honest, a build-up of dust and dirt can stop them from being able to absorb all the light that they need. It also makes them much more prone to pests, and unfortunately, in my experience, these plants can be quite susceptible to pests. I found thrips are probably the worst, and you can deal with them, like you can get them gone, but it can just be a bit of a pain from time to time. But if you've got lots of plants, you've just got to accept the fact it's going to happen from time to time. I don't know any plant parent that's had plants for years and years and years and has never at some point had to deal with pests. I have made some pest treatment videos, so again, I'll link them down below. But yeah, keeping their leaves clean is a really good way to help prevent this. What I usually do is I'll just go around with either a microfiber cloth or a damp sponge or something like that, and I'll give both sides of the leaves a really good wipe over, give them a check at the same time to make sure they're looking happy and healthy and there's no sign of pests. The signs to look out for pests tends to be sticky leaves, sandy residue, obviously pests themselves, webbing, all that sort of stuff. Anything that doesn't look normal, then if it doesn't look normal, it's probably not normal, and it doesn't mean that it's always going to be pest related, but I personally always assume that it is, so that I can isolate that plant quickly and avoid it spreading to any of my other plants. It's also a really good idea, if you don't want all of the growth of your plant just facing one way, to rotate your plant regularly, because these ones, they're very fast growing anyway, but they do chase the light incredibly quickly. And as you can see, if I turn my plant, it's only been facing one direction and it's all just kind of gone whoop. So yeah, if you do want nice full even growth, then just giving the pot a spin every few weeks or so should help it to stay looking lovely and full all the way around. I completely forgot my cable ties. 1 second. The other thing that you have to look out for with these plants as well, and I mentioned this briefly just now, is direct sun, especially the white bits of the plant. If you hadn't guessed already, the white bits are quite sensitive and they burn so easily. So to be honest, I never let my Syngonium Albos get any direct sun at all. And if you do only have a spot that receives quite a lot of direct sun, I would just make sure that you've got maybe a sheer curtain or something like that, or some other plants to shelter that plant so that it doesn't get any direct sun, because burning, it looks horrible, it's so bad for the plant, and the leaves can't really recover from it. It just stays looking horrible forever until you decide to chop it. So yeah, I would definitely avoid any direct sun. The other thing as well that I can't remember if I mentioned about keeping your plant in a lower light setting is that its growth is gonna not only slow right down. I mean, as I say, these plants, they're usually quite fast growing, but they're not gonna be if you keep them in low light. But also their growth isn't gonna be as full and condensed. Like, you'll probably end up with quite a viney, stretch looking plant where the leaves are spaced out quite a lot, whereas if it's in a higher light spot, then it's going to be a lot more like condensed and bushy like this, although you can tell that obviously this is just one vine. The growth is quite close together, if that makes sense. And the same thing applies to when you're propagating your plants as well. So for example, the cuttings that I took earlier, I'm just going to make sure that they've got plenty of light as well, because they're going to develop a root system a lot quicker if they've got good light. So that is also really important. And then when it comes to watering for these plants, I will personally always let the top few inches of soil completely dry out before I water them again, just because they can be quite susceptible to root rot. And root rot happens when they get water when they don't need it, and the root system can't absorb it, and the roots start to rot. And this is something that you really want to avoid in all of your houseplants if you possibly can, just because it can bring down your plants quite quickly. Although, yes, you can do certain things like hydrogen peroxide treatments and stuff like that, your plant's not always going to be savable. So if you're in any doubt at all, I would always say underwatering is better than overwatering. And on that note as well, I always say that I personally never stick to any kind of watering schedule for any of my plants. I will just kind of get to know them, figure out what they like in terms of soil moisture requirements. And for example, if I know that they like to dry out slightly, then I'll just go around, stick my finger in the soil. When I feel like they're ready for a drink, then I'll go ahead and water again. But I will never just guess, because I know from experience that can lead to so many issues and your plants will not be happy. So yeah, as I say, if you just let those top few inches of soil dry out before you water them, then that's ideal for this plant. And when you do come to water your plant, make sure that the pot you're using either has drainage holes so that the water, any excess water, can drain away. And if you don't have a pot with drainage, if you've got a pretty ceramic pot or something like that, I will always keep the nursery pot inside that pot, like I've done there, so that I can water my plant, let the water drain away, and then pop it back into its pretty pots. Just because, again, if there's water sitting around the roots that the plant doesn't need and can't absorb, then it can cause root rot again. Here in the UK at the moment, we're in what's known as growing season, which tends to be the spring and summer months when your plants are actively growing. They're pushing out lots of lovely new growth, and it's a great time of year all round. But when they are in this active state of growth, it's a really good idea to fertilise your plant regularly so that it can get all the nutrients it needs. It can continue to push out lots of lovely new growth, and it won't be nutrient deprived, because if it is, then again, its growth can become stunted. It's just not gonna look as healthy as you'd like it to be. And I'm personally using a fertiliser, not sponsored, I just love this fertiliser, called Liquid Gold Leaf, which you can get really easily here in the UK. Pretty sure they ship worldwide, but I'm not entirely sure. But anything that provides a really good balance of nutrients without being too harsh on your plants is gonna be perfect for them. And at the moment, I'm personally fertilising my Syngonium Albos every single time I water them, and they seem really, really happy with that. I haven't had any issues, but what you do have to watch out for is sometimes if you're fertilising your plant when it's not actively growing and you're just kind of giving it nutrients that it doesn't need at that time, then that can lead to something called fertiliser burn, which can also happen when you just give your plants way too much fertiliser. So always read the instructions. But fertiliser burn, it's horrible. Again, it's very similar to sunburn in these plants. It just looks like horrible browny yellow patches across the leaves, and you can't get rid of it once it's there. So it's really, really important to make sure you're giving your plant the right amount. And another thing that I always say as well is that If you've had a plant for a while and it's been in the same soil for a while and you've never fertilized it, then it's a really good idea when you do start fertilizing to just gradually ease them into it instead of going in with a full whack of fertilizer, because if they're not used to that and they've got used to, for example, living in a fairly unnutritious, is that a word? Unnutritious, low nutrient soil, then giving them a full hit of fertilizer can sometimes send them into shock and is not good for them at all. So yeah, as I say, if you're not quite sure, or if you are just starting, I would personally start with a little bit less than it says on the bottle, and then, assuming your plant's happy, gradually build it up over time. Right, cool. We have got our moss pole, and I'm actually contemplating potting these two up together because I think that would make for a lovely full plant. So I think I'm probably going to do that. What I've got here, I got this pot a while ago from my local garden centre, and as you can see, it's actually got a thing there that you can fix a moss pole to, and I'm not sure if that's going to be the best thing. Maybe. I mean, if I wanted 360 growth in this plant, then I could plant my cuttings all the way around. But to be honest, most of my plants sit up against a wall and look one way. So I think I'm probably going to put my moss pole just behind that there and hope that that just kind of helps to secure it in place a little bit. There we go. Yeah, I think that should work okay. Oh, wow. Yeah, this one's got a really, really nice, hang on, get some soil off and then I'll show you. A really nice root system on it. There you go. Can you see? Look at those. And healthy roots in this plant should usually be pale and full and healthy looking. And if they're very dark and sludgy, then that might mean that you've overwatered and caused root rot, or your plant hasn't been able to properly drain. I've made a video again about treating root rot before, so again, I'll link that down below. But these are some gorgeous roots. The other thing to think about with these plants is humidity, because they do absolutely love a humid environment. They are quite tolerant, like they're not gonna kick up as much of a fuss as some of my other tropical plants. That one, for example, they will be a little bit better at coping in lower humidity levels. But if you want them to look really conditioned, really happy, and avoid things like browning tips and stuff like that, then upping the humidity is going to do amazing things for them. I would say the lowest they can probably tolerate would be about 55%, but the more you increase it, the better. My room humidity in here tends to be about 65, 70%, sometimes a bit more, and my plants are really, really happy with that. So if you can invest in a decent humidifier, I would definitely recommend it. Just for most of your plants, apart from cacti and succulents and stuff like that, on the whole, most of your plants are going to appreciate higher humidity levels. So yes, if you can get a humidifier, great. If you can't, there are some other kind of makeshift things that you can do. You can use pebble trays, which are basically just trays filled with water and pebbles, and your plant sits on top of it, and as the water evaporates, it will also be able to benefit from the humidity. You can hang wet laundry out to dry in your house as well. That can naturally raise the humidity levels. You can leave pots of boiling water around. All these things that are obviously cheaper than running a humidifier. But I've got to say, if you've got lots of plants, there is honestly no replacement for a humidifier. Okay, so that one is ready to be potted. I'm just gonna take a look. In fact, maybe I will pot all three together. That would look lovely, actually. This is also a good example of a plant that's been kept in a higher light environment and one that's been kept in a slightly lower light environment. These both came from the same plants, but if you look at the shades of green, you can see that the one that's been in slightly lower light is a lot darker and more dramatic, but probably not quite as healthy as the one that's been in higher light in this room here. This one's actually been hanging for a little while, and they're not particularly hanging plants. I thought I would get it on a hanger. But yeah, I think I'm going to pot all these three up together. And this one here has got some pretty serious roots. As I say, this is the plant that I've chopped and propagated all of my Syngonium Albos from for probably the last year and a half, 2 years. And as you can see, she's got a lot of roots, because there were points where she was supporting a very big plant before I chopped her back again. So yeah, I'm not gonna be too careful with these roots. I think she can probably afford to lose a few. That's the other thing as well that a lot of people don't really think about, but root pruning every so often can actually help to stimulate and encourage new growth in your plants. So I'm not gonna be too precious about the roots if I do break a few. But yeah, as I was saying, in regards to humidity, really common issues with this plant often tend to be quite dry looking leaves, browning tips, browning edges, stuff like that. And although, yes, it can come down to other things such as incorrect lighting or a watering imbalance, a lot of the time it's down to the fact that your plant is just not getting enough humidity. So if that is happening and you are pretty sure that your watering's fine and the position it's in is good for that plant, then I would definitely recommend increasing the humidity. And then finally, I'm just gonna take this one out of the pot as well. And yes, so hopefully by the end of this video, we'll have a gorgeous full plant as opposed to when we started. This one here actually hasn't been potted up for that long, but whoa, but it's got some really decent roots on it. So I think these ones are all gonna do well potted together. So again, with humidity, and this also kind of feeds into temperature. I usually kind of link these two because they kind of go hand in hand. But during the colder winter months when you've got the central heating on, and also summer months when, depending on where you live, you might have air conditioning on and stuff like that, it's really important to remember that temperature does affect air humidity. And like, for example, we are in a massive, massive heat wave in the UK right now. And I know the air has just been so ridiculously dry, and the amount that I'm running my humidifier compared to other times of year is just absolutely crazy. I mean, I've had it set to about 90 most days, and that's what my plants have been needing because the air is so dry. And so if you possibly can, I always think it's a good idea to have a little humidity gauge or something like that on your wall or in amongst your plants so that you can just monitor it, see where it's at and adjust it accordingly. The humidifier that I use actually, which again, I'm saying I'll link everything below, but I'll link it in the description box below. It's a Levoit humidifier and it's got a setting on it where it actually reads the humidity in the air, and it kind of says, right, if it drops below 60%, then I will produce humidity. Wow, that's a very bad way of explaining it, but that's a really good humidifier to get for that reason, so that you don't have to constantly be like, get it on, da 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 da. But yes, that is my roundabout way of saying that if the temperature changes, then the humidity is also very likely to change, so just monitor it in your plants. Right, so the soil mixture that I use for these plants, pretty much the same for all of my Syngoniums, but I like to use normal houseplant potting compost, a bit of orchid bark, perlite, coconut core, and then if I'm feeling fancy, which I am today, I've added in some horticultural charcoal and worm castings as well, just to help keep the soil nice and clean, nice and nutritious, and I found that they really like that. It's not completely necessary, but I wanna make sure they're as happy as they can be, so that is what I'm doing. And then again with temperature with these ones, they are fairly flexible in what they can tolerate, but I find they tend to enjoy a slightly higher temperature. I'd say between 18 and about 26 degrees Celsius. Again, making sure that you can balance that with a good level of humidity. I always say that for faster growth in houseplants as well, the best possible way that I found for faster growth, obviously making sure they've got all the right conditions, all the right nutrients, all that sort of stuff, but upping the humidity and upping the temperature just does amazing things for them. I did have some of my Syngonium Albos in my grow cabinet there for a while, which is just fantastic because it's got really good light, really good heat, really good humidity, and they were so happy in there. The only reason I took them out is just because they grew so quickly and they couldn't fit in there anymore. So if you can recreate those same kind of conditions in your own home, then they are going to be so happy. These plants are also really not a fan of cold drafts. That does apply to quite a lot of tropical plants, but these ones can just, I mean, it can cause yellowing leaves. It can mean that they're not very happy at all. So when you're finding a place to put your plant, just make sure it's not right next to a really drafty window, an air vent, anything like that, and you shouldn't have any issues. They also do like the temperature to stay fairly steady, so it's not constantly fluctuating up and down, because if they're constantly having to adjust, then again, it can affect their growth rate. It can mean that they're more susceptible to issues. So if possible, they can tolerate slightly lower drops in temperature at night, but if possible, if you can keep the temperature fairly stable, then that will mean they're going to be a lot happier. So when it comes to attaching your plant to the moss pole for kind of optimum growth, as you can see here, this one has already gripped on by itself because I've just tucked one of its glareal roots into the moss. And as I said at the beginning of this video, once they get used to having damp moss around the aerial roots, they will start to form their own little root system, grip on. This also means that when you come to chop and propagate them, if you want to, it's so much easier to do because you don't have to wait for a root system to form. It will already have one, if that makes sense. But yeah, if you just kind of poke poke all of the aerial roots as much as you can into the soil, and then I'm just gonna use some garden wires to just tie it to the pole to start with, and then hopefully as it gets going I won't need to tie it anymore. It will just kind of climb by itself, but for now I'm just gonna secure these sections. So there we go. Again, already, as you can see, compared to where we started, this is looking like such a fuller, much more healthy plant. And I've still got lots of cuttings and propagations that if I want to, I can pop back in with this plant when they're ready to be potted up, or I can start a brand new plant. But this one, now that it's on its moss pole, should start to climb fairly quickly. It's important to keep the moss pole hydrated. I always just give it a water through at the same time I water the plant, and then spray it in between and make sure it's staying nice and moist. But yeah, I think that looks really, really lovely. And I think I covered everything about this plant in this video, but if anybody's got any questions or anything like that, then drop them down below and I'll do my best to help. And I also really hope that this was clear and understandable as a repot and chat style video. If you've watched my other care videos before and you've watched this one, do let me know if this works, because I enjoyed doing it this way. If it did work, I will do more like this. But yeah, I really hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.